gonna have to make a choice up here. Which side of the road I'm gonna park on. The other side? Yep, I'm doing it. Oh, there we go. Done. Ooh, water's real low out here. I think I've finally gotten to where I'm looking to go with my Polaroid work. Or at least I'm getting closer to it. Okay, so I have no idea if what I just shot worked. With it being like full on noon out here, basically 1:30, the light isn't wonderful, but we'll, I just gotta shoot it, you know? We'll see how this works. I'm not convinced it's gonna be great. Day 78 out of 365 was a day where I accidentally stumbled upon a vibe of image that I had been chasing after, but didn't really know how to get there. And maybe I was able to because of spring colors coming back, or maybe I'm just getting more comfortable with the Polaroid I2. Either way, I really love this photo, and I'm really enjoying the photos that came after it. And that's what a 365 project is for, if I'm being honest. I got the Polaroid I2 not because it was new or fancy, but because it had an easily accessible double exposure feature. My previous Polaroid camera, the Polaroid Now Plus, had a double exposure feature, but I had to access it with a smartphone app, which was super annoying, and I'm not gonna be doing that when I'm out in the field. A double exposure option built into a camera is essential for my photography work. I don't always shoot double exposures, but I like the option. Double exposure mode on the Polaroid I2 kind of reminds me of how the iPhone takes photos. With the iPhone, it's a composition machine. All you have to worry about is framing up the shot. The iPhone camera does everything else you could possibly need with no dials or having to play around with anything. It just works. Same with the Polaroid I2. I mean, the Polaroid I2 is a little quirkier of a camera and maybe a little more difficult to use than an iPhone. But overall, once you set it to double exposure mode, all you gotta do is take 2 photos, or 3 or 4, depending on how many exposures you decide to pick. The only settings you have to change is the exposure compensation dial and the flash. Those are the only 2 things you could possibly change. The camera does the rest, which gives you more room in your brain for the important part, which is how pieces fit together in a scene. And real quick, I don't care if you're shooting this with a Polaroid camera or a digital camera, the rules of double exposures are always the same. Your canvas is the shadows, and your highlights are the opposite of a canvas, an eraser of sorts. Say you have a dark square. No light is hitting it. It's just dark, but it's surrounded by highlights. But your second image is a person maybe surrounded by trees. Because this square is dark and surrounded by highlights, no matter what happens, the photo of the person is only gonna show up where the square is in the frame. The highlights are gonna erase everything around the square, and the person, if it's framed in line with the square, will fit inside the square. Here's a non-Polaroid example I shot in Los Angeles last year. For this shot, I shot into the darkness of a trash can opening on the Manhattan Beach Pier. And then I shot a photo of the beach. See how the subject is mostly contained into the rectangle? Find your shadows, and that will determine the shape of the subject. Okay, so I shot my first shot of this mural. Now I'm gonna shoot the second shot. I'm gonna use this line right here to divide my frame, since this is the shadow side. And these highlights, everything will kind of disappear into here. are really great for this style of shooting because there's not really any information in the shadows. You treat shadows in a Polaroid like basically negative space. They're just darkness. I've talked about before how the quirkiness of the Polaroid I2 or how the light meter works or whatever kind of requires you to set your base exposure compensation at -2/3 of a stop. And honestly, I just kind of leave it there most of the time. But sometimes I want the shadows darker and the highlights not to consume as much. I'll sometimes back it off a full stop or a stop and a third. Because remember, if you're exposing 2 or more images, those exposures are doubling up, meaning your final image is going to be overexposed if the first and second image are too bright. So when in doubt, underexpose a tad, just a little bit. But look, at the beginning of this video, I showed an image that wasn't just clean-cut geometric shapes. It was kind of an abstract mess of different elements. And in fact, I made a bunch of abstract double exposures pretty much all week with the Polaroid I2 for my Polaroid 365 project. But really, I'm still focusing on where the shadows are for these, but I'm also letting the second image find my shadow spots for me a bit. I think for double exposures to work, they still need to have a subject of some kind. They need to have something that grounds them in at least a smidge of reality, something people can recognize. But if you want to get good with double exposure photography, you need to learn how to see shadows. And a Polaroid camera is the best way to do that because it simplifies the shadows. It's very clear where the shadows are landing because of the lack of dynamic range and resolution. And as far as Polaroid cameras go, you can't go wrong with the Polaroid I2 for double exposure work. I used to use a Polaroid Spectra years ago, and you could do double exposure, but you had to trick it into doing them, and eventually it just ended up breaking the camera. And like I said, the Polaroid Now Plus, you have to fumble with an app, which is frustrating. And the Polaroid I2, once you get used to how it sees stuff, gets out of the way and allows you to focus on the elements in front of you. So go, try it out. You can follow me on Instagram at Will Malone. You can follow my Polaroid Instagram account at RoidRage72. And thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.